Okay, welcome back, and thank you very much, Andy, for the rich presentation. I'm sure many people have lots to say, and I felt that myself. I have so much to say that I need now a session to present this. But I am going to open the discussion to the floor. I might just use my power as the chair to take the first comment and make a quick one, actually. So, being a leftist myself, I found it very difficult to discuss multiculturalism between the right-wing debates and using the failures of multiculturalism to promote their anti-Muslim, anti-immigrant agenda, rather than actually discussing multiculturalism, and between the liberals and the left-wing being just so useless and completely hopeless in trying to genuinely look into genuinely criticize multiculturalism in order to move forward with this. They've been avoiding completely or shutting any healthy debates or justifying what's happening under respect and tolerance. So that's one thing. But I might pick up on one of the very last things that you mentioned, which is some of those who've been against multiculturalism, David Goodhart and Philip, and their arguments against it, which I think are not that sensible as much as other people who've been against multiculturalism and have very sensible and rational arguments against it, like Kenan Malik, who in his opinion, we need to distinguish between multiculturalism as a lived diversity, as a lived experience, and that brings us all to all the clashes and conflicts between the different cultures, which help us contrast and create the social change we hope for. And on the other hand, we have the policies, multiculturalism as policies, and that means dividing people into different groups based on the cultures and religions in order to assign them rights and then guard these cultures and divisions. So I'm wondering how you see that with the comment of you supporting being pro the opening up about the issues we have with multiculturalism and cleaning our dirty linen on the outside and publicly to create these clashes. Yeah. How do you see the two differences?
I think Kenan Malik's analysis is a very sensible one. I don't agree with some of it, and there are other people like Southall Black Sisters who have had a very effective feminist criticism of multiculturalism as well for the same kind of reasons. And I think it's really important to hear what those people are saying. I mean, interesting, I don't really call it multiculturalism most of the time. The word's got too many syllables in it. I mean, I prefer saying something like anti-racism, actually, because I think racism is the underlying issue. Having said that, these issues are not just about, well, I mean, race is a weird concept in itself because it doesn't really exist in terms of evolutionary terms, but it's something that is a social construct which we use and which hits us in the face when we walk down the street. It's a very, very paradoxical notion. The issue about multiculturalism, of course, is that multiculturalism is deliberately more, includes more than just race as pigmentation. It includes culture, it includes ethnicity and so forth. And in my view, all of these dimensions, whether it's race, whether it's sexual orientation, whether it's gender, whether it's disability, are all actually need to be open to each other. We all have different identities, and our identities are not just racial ones, or ethnic ones, or religious ones. We all have different identities, and we need to be looking at, and there's an even worse word, which is, I think, got one more syllable than multiculturalism, which is often used these days, which is intersectionality, which some of you may have heard of, which is an important concept, though a crazy word to describe it, which is about the fact that we need to be aware that within different population groups, let's take a particular refugee community, there will be lots of differences, and we need to be alive to how power relates across those differences, quite as much within those groups as we are between them. And unless we're doing that, we're not actually, in my view, doing what I would call multiculturalism. And we are probably actually supporting, as Ken and Malik might well argue, some quite racist, some quite discriminatory practices, both from ourselves and from that group as well. So I think one has to be thoroughgoing about it. You can't just, if all you're doing is setting up a group and then letting that group get on with it, what I call lazy multiculturalism, this notion that, you know, because it's their culture, they can get on with forcing their girls to marry at 12 or whatever. That to me is really poisonous and pernicious, and anything like that is not, in my view, positive at all, let alone multicultural.
Okay. I'm going to open it to the floor now. I'll take any questions.
I think the elephant in the room here is the Muslim, I don't know, community or ethnicity or whatever it is. To speak about in this particular stage, particular time, it's obvious that there is some kind of problem as far as Muslims in Britain are concerned. They are not, of course, one ethnicity. They are more properly described, they are cultural, religious, or something like that. The reason is that this recurrence of violence, which is Islamic religiously based according to a certain interpretation of Islam, this has been occurring regularly and with increasing violence, and it seems to me, I come from a Muslim country, and I am, in some peculiar sense, I am still Muslim, you can say that. But I don't think that this is as usually described, which is more, I think this is where we have to criticize the, let us say, the British attitude, which is, there is too much political correctness in this idea. The problem is not confined to smaller groups of Muslims. The fact that this violence is going on all the time means that the community itself, the Muslim group itself, there is a problem with the mentality of the people. The majority of Muslims are, in a sense, an incubation environment for violence, for distorted understanding of Islam. So, as far as multiculturalism, generally, in my opinion, is the right choice in dealing with the problems of different cultures and in a British society or in any society, actually. But in this case, I think we have to be more careful as far as I think that the British policy has been influenced by this factor. Actually, in the whole of Europe now, I mean, the rise of the rightist and racist parties, I think to a great extent is associated with this Muslim factor, this elephant in the room. There are other reasons, of course, but I think that the main reason is the fact that the Muslims are not able to deal with their understanding of Islam. There are all kinds of reasons for this. I don't want to go into this, but this is a fact. I mean, the fact that these groups are found, they are active, they are producing violence all the time, means that there is a problem with the whole thing, with the whole setup. It has to be faced like this. I mean, we Muslims should search our souls face our problems there and then help those who are not Muslims to understand the problem. We should not be too politically correct like, I mean, leftist, liberals, or even Western governments about this. They have their limits. They cannot interfere too much. They cannot put their finger on the real sort of the problem. But we Muslims or who come from Muslim countries should take up this responsibility. I think this is the real problem in this context.
Shall I just respond to that quickly?
Yeah.
I'm old enough to remember when terrorism was not a Muslim thing at all, and it was an Irish thing. And actually, round here there was a pub on the corner called the Skiddaw, literally on that corner over there. And I remember once, in my best English accent, going in and ordering a packet of cigarettes because I smoked in those days, and being aware that there was a collection for the IRA going on, and I was definitely in the wrong place at the wrong time, having to get out of there quite quickly. So, you know, the white tribes have fought. Only 70 years ago, we kind of brought the whole world down almost. So this is not just a Muslim thing. I mean, one thing I would say, however, is that I think Britain's foreign policy allied with this lazy multiculturalism that has allowed the Saudis to plough millions and millions, actually billions of pounds into building mosques that then have to support their rather deviant version of Islam, has been a problem, and I agree with you on that. Well, actually, interesting, I think in the UK context, if you're looking for issues around what one might call fundamentalist Islam, and not all fundamentalism is always violent, of course, very much not, but actually the Deobandis from Pakistan, I think, have more, are in some ways more of an issue than the Wahhabis. The notion that it's just Saudi Arabia. But look, you know, the violence that we kind of evinced on the whole of the rest of the world, actually, I mean, there are only about 20 countries in the whole of the world that Britain at some point has not tried to interfere with or to invade. And I'm literally, and some of them are in, you know, weird parts of Asia where it's quite difficult to get to. This stuff comes back, you know, this is partly blowback from how we have been over the last 200, 300 years. And it's not a surprise that actually the violence that we meted out all over the world is coming back in weird and dreadful forms. I agree that Muslims need to, I speak as a convert to Islam, that we need to look at who and what we are and what we're saying and doing and so forth. But I also think that everybody does, actually. I think everybody needs to look at why it is that young Muslim men, often third generation Muslim men, they're not the ones who had the cultural problems, first of all, who didn't speak the language. They're very often young men who are very confused and have had some sort of brush with the law, and often, in my view, have serious mental health problems, actually end up being so deranged as to do some of the crazy things that they do. I think there's some real issues for all of us, Muslim, non-Muslim, to look at. And I don't think we're being very good at looking at those issues, both within our own religious groups. I'm not religious myself, really, and more widely as well. But I take your point.
Okay. I might actually follow up on that. Just something that we have been discussing as a Sudanese community, as within the open seas, for a while. Which is this second and third generation identification of themselves and how they see themselves and the challenges and issues they've been facing. We had a speaker from the second generation who, she was obviously British, she had Sudanese heritage, but that's not who she is. And a number of other Sudanese second and third generation identify themselves as either completely British or having a slight mixed identity. But that in mind, we do have an issue of we're among the communities that had a big number send joining youth groups, joining ISIS.
Sure.
20-something, and if I'm right, it's 27 British youth from a Sudanese background have been joining ISIS, and in a great number of them, almost half of them, are doctors. I don't know what's the link, but I mean, it seems like
University, weren't they?
Yeah. So, I mean, do you think that's something to do with the rising identity politics? Is that something to do with the integration? Is that to do with institutional racism and how they feel, so they need to seek another identity? Do you have any thoughts? I know it's a complex subject, but it's also open to the floor.
Just very quickly, I think two things. I think young people have a real desire, and I think the one defining characteristic, and I think it sometimes does affect Muslims because of the nature of Islam and its monotheistic and tawheed, as you sometimes call it, I think, unity, more, which is this notion that you can only understand the world if you're utterly clear about it and if you believe something really palpable. Now, as a 60-year-old, I think I remember when I was young, I wanted to have that kind of certainty too. I wanted to be absolutely sure that, you know, and many of my ideas, looking back on them now, I think was pretty crazy. But I did some pretty stupid things. Luckily, I managed to stay out of trouble. I think most young people do, and they have this kind of sense of certainty. And actually, the world, as I get older, I realise is much more fluid, much more, you know, that this desperation to have clarity, especially if you're confused in a country that you feel is partly your own but partly discriminates against you. But the narrative about who becomes a terrorist is completely up the shit creek without a paddle, as far as I can see. I mean, the notion that it's all poor, depressed, dispossessed people is just not true, actually. There are no kind of particular types of people, educated or not educated, who may or may not become terrorists or join ISIS or become extremists. It just is not the case that. I mean, I think there are really, I think in my view, three characteristics of people who, and I won't have anything to do with Prevent, so I wouldn't be doing this. But if I was looking for people who might be likely to, it would be anybody. I mean, all the evidence shows that if your friendship group is involved in extremism, then you will be involved in extremism too. So that's what we know about young people. They operate in those ways. That's number one. Number two, that you've probably had some sort of brush with the law at some point. It is quite a high characteristic. And thirdly, that you have this desire for certainty, being certain about the world, and that those three things are what I would look for if my kid was, I thought, likely to be in danger. It wouldn't be class, it wouldn't be whether they're doctors or not, it wouldn't be things like that at all.
Okay. Any comments?
Yeah, I just wanted to go back to the multiculturalism. I think London is a great city, and a lot of people here integrated into London community. Okay. But my question is, how does the government look to integrating immigrants into programs that would help them to dissolve into the society, to be part of the society? This is how you enforce multiculturalism. But how do you do that?
Well, I think what you do is probably spend some sensible money on it. I mean, what you don't do, let me tell you what you don't do. You don't cut adult education classes. You actually make, the government has been absolutely disgraceful in saying, first of all, you've got to integrate, and you must learn English, and then you turn around and there's no classes left, apart from if you're a Muslim woman. Now you have to go to those classes, otherwise you're in some sort of trouble. This is just ridiculous, craziness. So, one of the problems about multiculturalism that I would say that can be said of multiculturalism, if it becomes benign neglect, then you are going to have a problem. And it seems to me that the problem we're in right now, we're in a big problem. I am really worried about what's happening in this country right now. I agree that we may have had some successes around integration, though it's not a term that I often use in the past, but I think we are really in danger of things getting bad very, very quickly with what's happened in the last couple of days, actually. I'm really seriously worried about it. And with a government that believes in austerity, which basically means that poor people will suffer so that rich people will get rich, I'm afraid the contradictions are going to be at the level of people who are not particularly, and I'm talking about white people, who are not particularly well educated and have not actually learned that migration and immigration is something that's bound to happen wherever they are, and if they want their economy to be a successful one, they're going to have to put up with it, because the quickest way of crashing the economy is stop immigration happening, and vice versa. If you stop immigration happening, it's the quickest way to crash the economy. So, you know, we live in a world now that many white young people have not actually been educated in this stuff. So there's a whole load of issues there about the curriculum. You know, why is the curriculum so white? Why did we had to have a struggle? I don't know if you've heard of Mary Seacole, who was everyone would have possibly heard of Florence Nightingale, who was a very famous white woman who went to the Crimean War, and actually was about 50 miles away. Mary Seacole was there right in the front line. She was black.
That's right.
And she was an extraordinary woman, in my view, far more worthy of all this sort of sainthood that Florence Nightingale. We had to work incredibly hard to ensure that she was still on the curriculum, that young people would still be taught about Mary Seacole as a thing that young people need to know about. Now, you know, so all of these issues, when I talk about, I suppose, racism institutionally, right throughout all of these different institutions are those kinds of issues. It's set up for white people like me, and we're very bad, I'm afraid, at opening up the world to people who are not like us. And I wish it were different, and I, you know, struggle to make it so, but it's a long struggle, and we need to have you guys getting more angry with us, in my view. We need more anger from you guys. You need to be challenging us, you know?
I think there's been yeah. So for that answer.
I think the doctrine of state of multiculturalism strategy, which has encouraged different cultures live their lives separate as a part of each other, as a part of mainstream. Open mind society where your views and religion don't. And with equal respect and scholarly interest. When questions in your views and your opinion, what is that thousands of young Europeans becoming jihadis and well, and more than 4,000 fight with the Islamic State in Syria, and many European or thousand citizens engaged in barbers and carnage that what happened in Paris and Belgium, and you don't know with the.
So you're more looking. You're more looking at the issue from a broader context, the same issues that's happening here, and why might people join, but in a broader European prospect rather than a UK one.
I mean, if you allow me just to go in the same direction of my colleague here,
that is the problem of fanatic or fundamentalist is not confined to the minority people, regardless of the total number of people subscribe to this idea. From Tunisia, there are more 5,000, 7,000 joined to that. In Sudan, this is a state policy. When they fight in the towns and they send the young people, that is, they're going to paradise if they die in jihad. And the curriculum and education in the whole Saudi Arabia and the Egypt and the Sudan, there is a whole book dedicated to that issues. So this is the people here, the people from Muslim background, from Europe who join these people. In numbers, they are very small minorities. But they worry and talk about them because they came back and affect the society here. And that's why they raise the issue. And the problem of the fundamentalism and extreme views, that is the young people, they seeking ideal society. They are seeking just society. And they offer by these ideologies, either the Marxism or the Islam or whatever, a very clear-cut issue. Dichotomies, binary thinking that is either with us or against us. Black and white, the clear-cut answer. Then if I go to that path, that is for sure that is path will lead to social justice, lead to be a martyr. I'm going to, this is the way to go. And in doing that, they sacrifice their own life for a very good cause. But the bothered me that is, what is the input of secular education in Europe? There seems a very little input, because I can understand the young people in Sudan were subject to the strong media and mosque and education that is. But here in Europe, where you have a secular education, that is not affecting, not creating a critical mind person that can question things, and he takes easy answers. This is the things we should look at.
Absolutely, no, thank you. I think that's really important. And I'm afraid what's happening to our education system is becoming less and less about training young people to think and more about training young people to take exams. So, I mean, even that is being marked. I mean, I'm really worried about that. Just to say, though, that I mean, it was before my time, but I remember I had some good friends who were very much older, much older than I was, who actually went to Spain to fight as independent volunteers in the Spanish Civil War in the 1930s, and that, you know, that was the kind of equivalent that we're talking about then. So, you know, young people like to do things like that. They like to take risks, and if they think they're taking a risk that is about something that they want, that is going to, as you rightly say, that has a whole bunch of often slightly half-baked kind of stuff, because, I mean, these guys don't often read the Quran. That's the other thing that's important. I mean, the notion that actually these people are that somehow, you know, steeped in Quranic tradition and understand all of these different distinctions is very often wrong. And yeah, they want something certain that's out there, and we're very bad in our secular education at giving people the kinds of thinking, inquiring minds that they need to have to be able to challenge their own peer group, because it's often their own peer group that is the problem around what it is that is radicalizing them.
I actually might have a slight different take on this, that there are actually, despite being seen as a secular society and having secular education, there's lots going on underneath that's not well reported and not well documented. So there's lots of community and cultural settings that encourage lots sort of things. They're negative, they're Quranic schools, they're Christian and faith schools, they're still legally operating, they're Jewish schools that are legally operating, and they're plural legal systems. You have Sharia courts, you have churches that have still power and so on. So it's true that it might be a secular atmosphere, but there's lots of things I think they're happening underneath, but we might have different opinions on this.
And it's possible to set up a new school now and refuse to talk about Darwin. I mean, there are some crazy things happening in the education system that really are. I'm a secularist to a degree, but when it comes to education, I would close the public school system down tomorrow, actually, because the big problem we've got is that 0.0% of the population get to rule everything because they went to that schools and nobody else can get a look in. So unless you deal with that issue, and if you allow Church of England schools, then you've got to allow Muslim schools, you've got to allow Jewish schools, and then you're in a real problem. I'm sorry, I don't hold much by the French secularism, but on one thing I would say we need a secular education system.
We do need that, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just a little bit confused. I think we are mixing two subjects here. First, how to accept multiculturalism and make our society homogeneous and work in harmony. Yeah.
But homogeneous is not necessarily harmonic.
No.
And the second one is
Harmony requires notes, not one.
Harmony.
Well, harmony is not homogeneity is not harmonic. Harmony requires at least two notes.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, but this is what I'm saying. And the other subject is to prevent bad things from happening to our society. Yeah. So one of the bad things is people volunteer to ISIS or whatever, or people committing crimes, or people doing anything bad. Yeah. So I think the first thing to do is to make people work together in a society to improve our multicultural society.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then we can prevent bad things from happening at the level of the family, at the level of the community, at the level of the country.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks. 2 points, and then quickly. You said earlier on we should be getting more angry at you as us as different races. But the problem is we see as a supreme race. We believe 100% the white race does it better. If I go to a place, I'd rather be served by a white person in a public office rather than to be served by a Caribbean, black, Asian person. Yeah, this is it. A white person says thank you on the street, a black person wouldn't. So subconsciously, I am seeing the white person as a person who has the betterness. So for me to turn against you, I have to say, hold on a second. Guys, stop being racist towards us. A little bit unlikely. At the government, maybe. But the white man outside, very unlikely. I would get racist at my sort of ethnic minority next to me. Well, that's me, my own opinion, right? Than at the white man, believe me. Maybe it's the way we taught, or maybe it's the culture they reflected.
No, it's the fact that we've managed to divide and rule so well that you have those ideas in your head. Come on. Yeah, absolutely. We've been doing this for hundreds of years. That's why we ended up, sure.
Yeah, exactly. And the problem is, we were always thought, don't mingle with the darker color than you, because the darker color, for any reason, much dirtier, much less supreme, much. So you're actually subconsciously shutting yourself from looking at them. So the minute you come in contact with them, you're almost feeling like you're doing something naughty. Oh gosh, I shouldn't. Do I really have to look at you? I would rather not to. And, is it, talking as a young person who grew up in the country and has faced a lot of times where it was radicalization and extremism coming straight at my face, it's a beast that has no color, way, nothing. It will just catch the weakest, and it's the weakest of the herds on the outside. I'm teaching in a school at the moment, which is the head teacher. She is Irish. There's a head of here who's bisexual, and there is the staff is 90% white, but 99% is of Muslim pupils. Maybe that's an idea for homogeneity or homogeneous or culture, multiculturalism. I pray Jummah in the school. There is a place to make wudu in the school. They give us 8 holiday. And people discuss religion inside freely. So the head teacher decided that I cannot force a rule that's irrelevant to what the majority is, so let it be. So what happens is, the kids, they come and ask me, oh, if I don't fast Ramadan, does that mean I have to do fast the whole thing? Or a kid who's in year 11, sorry, year 10, which means he's 14, said that I did a fast Ramadan, so I have to feed 60 people who are not able to feed themselves. I said, so where do you get that from? Wow! Do you have even one to feed? You even have money to feed your own self? But like you said, this is the information they have from somewhere else. So yes, are these people being fed the right information?
Yeah.
No, they're not.
No, there's a real job to do. Yeah.
So the question is, how can we as a community overcome our own, what you call it, problems, our own, what's the word here? It's gone, the word is gone. Prejudice. Prejudice towards our own identity, race and religion, to make that community face stronger, to be able to say to you, hey, white man, stop.
Well, look, I'm the last person you need to ask that question. I would advise you to go away and read Malcolm X, if you want the answer. It's quite simple.
Freedom of speech, we need to create free spaces to talk, I think. Be able to discuss these things openly and safely without having anyone guarding us.
Thank you very much. Sorry to come late, stuck in traffic. I want to mention there are a few issues, and there's so many reasons I think multiculturalism could be have problems in this country, and the politicians usually, as you say, they divide and rule. There are areas where the multiculturalism is really well accepted and people live in harmony. But there are other areas which are not. And you have to look at them at what's called postcode lottery, where there are, for example, I live near an area, I live outside London, but one of the nearby counties. But there are, like example, small towns. There is a town which is mostly upper middle class, and there is another town which is nearby, which is, we could say that like labor class. You know that the classification has changed actually in the last few years. It's like about 7 classes now. But anyway, what you could see even on the white classes, and that was what frustrates them, in those poor areas, that everything is thrown at them. So if there is new buildings, it's thrown at them. Erosion into the green spaces is thrown at them. If they want an incinerator, will thrown at that part. But the privileged area, they don't have any expansion, they don't have any problems, they actually do. And I actually spoken to my MP and I clashed with him, because that area he lived in, they have not actually touched. They have not had any expansion, or erosion to their green belt for that. So the people on these areas, they feel frustrated, and frustration creates problem. And who are you going to take it on?
Sure.
On those people you think they are lower than you. Because you can't reach to those people. Some people think that, oh no, we're not going to change anything. So it's negative. There's all these negative feelings make them try to, and the media then comes in the media. They are always struggling for jobs, while an Eton graduate goes straight away to Cambridge or Oxford and straight away to whatever job they like. So there is a problem, poverty, and still till now, whoever said that here, everyone is equal, that's not right. Absolutely not right. So we have to look at this to tolerate each other. Even the white people cannot really, they're not on the same level.
Well, just in response to what you said, I think that you're absolutely right. This notion that Britain was ever a homogenous, we may have all had pigmentation this colour, but this notion that we were ever a homogenous culture or country. I mean, we had civil wars piling across the countryside. Partly, we were lucky that we were an island and we were therefore able to, industrialise rather earlier than other parts of Europe, which allowed us effectively to take over the rest of the world before anybody else could get there. We're lucky. It wasn't anything particularly white or good or You know, it was nothing about us. It was about just an accident, a history. And we've been playing on it ever since. But I entirely take your view. Class is just as important. And if we prioritise race and forget about class, or the other way around. I mean, I'm old enough to remember people in the militant wing of the Labour Party back in the 1970s saying, no, you don't need to worry about racism, man. You know, as soon as we've nationalised the top 200 companies in this country, racism will disappear. Well, come on. And the opposite is equally as crazy.
And the media plays a big role. The media has to be held accountable. Because if someone, you tell people that, oh, the Eastern European are coming and taking your jobs, blah, blah, blah. So you divert their attention from actually class problem into the immigrant problem. And then you just wait and laugh and watch them.
We've just had a murder 2 days ago, which most of the press are refusing to call terrorist because it's done by a white person. I mean, I'm sorry, this is out and out racist.
It is an act of terror.
Yeah.
Completely misleading. Picking on equal opportunities that Nahla has just mentioned, ROTA has done a good report on how people from certain nationalities, ethnicities, plus or ethnicities, nationalities, or different minority ethnicities. Might be less likely to get a job, less likely to get a job, more likely to get stopped and searched.
Oh yeah,
and,
sure. Well, look, I mean, if you don't already know, I'm sure most of you have experienced it. You sound like you certainly have. You know, there is an ethnic penalty to virtually everything that you guys do, especially if you're a young male. You know, you're 4 times more likely to get stopped in the street if you're African Caribbean, 5 times now if you're Muslim. You can do twice as well at school, but if your name is not a standard English one, you need to make twice as many applications to even get an interview, for God's sake. You know, I mean, right from the kind of street stuff, where all this stuff happens, right up to kind of whether you get to Oxford or not, and everything in between, there is an ethnic penalty to being not white and not British in the original indigenous sense of the term. And I guess that's what my organisation has been set up to try and do something, a very small amount, but what we can to do something about that, because we cannot live together in London if those differences are allowed to continue, because people will get angry, and I'd say they're damn right so to do.
They are. I think anger plays a major role of what's happening across all the diversity of diverse ethnicities.
I think if this government continues in the same way as it is doing now, this problem will get bigger.
On Friday morning, this could get a lot worse, because it won't just be this government. Cameron's relatively lightweight compared to some of the people who'll come in. If we vote to leave Europe, we are going to be in serious trouble. And we will have empowered all of these nutcases, including Farage, to say and do whatever they like. I mean, I don't know if you've seen the poster today of, a stream of largely young people from Syria trying to get across the border in Slovakia, for God's sake. And this is now being used as a way of trying to terrorize white people into voting out. I mean, we are in really dangerous territory. I've been alive for 61 years. I remember what it was, a whole range of different, I remember just up the road in 1976 being part of a riot at Notting Hill Carnival, but this is by far the worst that I've seen it. I mean, back in the day in the 60s, I'm just about old enough to remember it, it was in your face, no blacks, no coloured, no Irish, but you kind of knew where you were with that, Now this is getting really pernicious and really dangerous, it seems to me. And we need to be very careful what happens. I'm sorry to be alarmist. I'm not normally an optimist, but this is really scaring the living daylights out.
Being realistic, I think.
But